Aloha, I'm Emily Thoreau Threat, and I'd like to share with you how my life experiences have led me to develop my happiness and grief alliance, where you can find happiness and grieve at the same time. I can relate to how it feels to grieve because I've been grieving most of my life. This started with my grandparents. I lost all of my grandparents by the time I was 13. And then when I was 13, my dad traded our house for an ambulance company. So Mom and Dad and I moved into a small house on the company property, and we ran the company 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We dispatched the ambulances from a phone next to Mom and Dad's bed, and one in our living room and one in the office for the company. And whoever was closest was the person who got to dispatch the ambulance. And at that time, you only had to be 14 years old and have an advanced first aid certificate to go on ambulance calls. So, since my dad was the first aid instructor for the community, he made sure that I had my first aid card by the time I was 14. And on my 14th birthday, I went on my first call, which was a head-on collision with two families and multiple fatalities. And I learned what the real world of having an ambulance company meant. I continued to work for the company throughout high school when I wasn't at school or at band practice or in theater, and I did a lot of that so that I could not have to be at home because I knew how hard I'd be working at home. So when I graduated from high school, I decided it was time for me to go away from that town to go to college. So I did. And when I went to college, I ended up becoming a nurse because I wanted to help people, but I wanted to help them live at that point. And so I got very involved in labor and delivery and teaching childbirth education classes. And I really loved that. And we moved, and I wanted to pursue my BSRN, and the university where we were wouldn't accept my nursing credits. They'd accept the units that I'd earned, but they had different nursing classes for me to take, and it was going to take me 5 years to get my BSRN, and I discovered it would only take me 3 years to get my bachelor's and master's degree. So I did that instead. And I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in theater because I had always loved theater. And when I got the degree, I said, whoops, okay, now what do I do? So I decided I better move on to something a little bit more practical than that. So I started studying writing in the English department. And I loved that. I just really loved writing. And I had the opportunity to be a TA in a couple of writing classes. And as I was watching the instructor, I kept thinking, I could do that. And then I got to the point where I was saying, I think I could do better than that. So I became a lecturer in writing at the university and did that for 30 years. And I loved teaching writing. Well, in the process of all this, had met Jacques and married him. And he was a philosophy professor, and we both had a love of theater and performing and everything related to theater. So after I had been teaching for quite a while, I really wanted to do more in theater. So I ended up stopping teaching for a while and created a live theater and school of arts. And he had a place to perform, and I had a place that I could be creative in so many different ways, and I really loved it. And then he got sick. And I was spending my time between the theater and the hospital and being at home taking care of him, and it just wasn't working. So I was able to donate my theater and school of arts to a nonprofit organization who could keep it going, and I was very happy to do that. And that way I was able to spend the last 2 years of Jacques' life with him all the time, and taking him to his appointments and caring for him and sitting at his bedside at the hospital. And when he died, I was kind of lost, really not sure of what I was supposed to do. And I had a really hard time dealing with that. And I found Marcy Shimoff's book, Happy for No Reason, and I read that, and I thought, that's what I need to do. I don't feel like I have a reason to be happy, but I want to be happy anyway. So I started focusing on happiness at that point. And then I met Ron. And I had no intention of meeting anybody or ever getting married again. But we fell in love, and it was wonderful. And we had a great life together, living in the moment, until he got sick too, ironically, with the same thing that Jacques had. They both had congestive heart failure that ended up with renal failure, which ended up with dialysis for both of them. So Ron had lived on Maui years before I met him, and he had always wanted to return there to live. So when he suggested it to me, I knew that he was telling me that that's where he wanted to spend his last days. So we sold everything and moved to Maui. And we had a great 2 years. It was really marvelous. And when he died, I thought, okay, now I really don't know what I'm going to do. I remembered how after my dad died, my mom didn't smile again, and I knew I didn't want to live my life that way. I had to find a way to deal with this. So since writing was a thing that I loved to do, I went back to writing and wrote just for myself, and found lots of things in what I was writing that was bringing me happiness. And I thought, I could teach this kind of writing to other people who are dealing with grief and loss, and they could get happy too. So I put an ad on Meetup, because I didn't really know that many people on the island yet. And all these strangers came over to my house, and we started meeting once a month to write about grief. And they loved it. We formed such a tight bond, and it was a really good group together. And they said, could we please start meeting every other week instead of once a month? And so, of course, we did, until the pandemic happened. Then we moved online. But I thought, I can do more with all these things I've learned in this process. So I wrote a book, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. And in the book, at the end of each of the 26 chapters, there's a different practice that you can do to help you find happiness, to help you deal with your grief in a positive way. And I really loved doing that. And as I did that, I thought, I can do more. Once the book was written, I didn't have that to continue writing, so I decided to show others how to experience grief and happiness at the same time. So, did you lose someone you've lost and you're afraid to process that grief? Are you feeling unhappy now because you haven't been able to deal with loss? Would you like to learn how to smile again? Then my Happiness Alliance group is for you. I'd love to have you join us. I'm Emily Thoreau-Threat, author of Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief, and I'm here to guide you on your way.